Pandemic. Doesn't sound like that big of a threat when you hear it, but it's actually deadly. The effect that a pandemic can cause to the world is not mere. A pandemic can cause a lot of damage to the physical, mental, and social life of humans. Well, that is basically the definition of a disease, right? So what is actually a pandemic? What are the different pandemics the human race has been through? How could you manage the outbreak of the pandemics? All you have to do is watch the video till the end. Guys, welcome back to the channel. If you have not yet smashed that subscribe button, well, what are you waiting for? Don't forget to like and share the video on your way. Not sure about liking the video? Wait and find out for yourself. So the first question anyone would raise in such a situation is, what is actually a pandemic? Pandemic is basically an epidemic of any kind of infectious disease, which has found its way across a large area, like a spread over different continents or worldwide. Well, in the current situation, mostly for the past few years, pandemic is a word that has been ringing in our ears for quite a while now. While the global pandemic caused by the coronavirus taking lives of many and leaving the world in a state of fear, even for just leaving their homes. Well, that's what the fear of dying could do to you. Another thing that you could get deceived by is that any disease that affects individuals all over the world is not considered a pandemic. The disease at first should be infectious to be considered as a pandemic. Number 10. Flu pandemic. Flu pandemic, commonly known as the Spanish flu, broke out at the end of World War I. The flu pandemic of 1918 is considered as the most severe pandemic, recently wiping out a significant population. The death toll was about 50 million. The causative agent is H1N1 virus. It was first identified by military personnel in 1918. The number of people infected with the virus was about 500 million. However, the mortality rate was about 10%, which means about 5 million people affected by the disease were dead. The age group most susceptible to the disease was below 5 years old or more than 65 years. What makes this pandemic unique from others is that it causes high mortality, even in healthy people. Scientists all over the world have been working on its virulence factor. However, the reason why it became so deadly is still a mystery. Interventions at the time were mainly non-pharmaceutical, which means the only way to limit the spread of the disease was quarantine or isolation. The virus, once inside the body, causes increased release of cytokines and even attacks the immune system of adults. Overcrowding and lack of nourishment increased the spread of disease. Sex differences in mortality were also noticed, with men having an increased risk of mortality. Number 9. The Black Death. You might have heard of the Great Mortality or bubonic plague, with a death toll of 75 to 200 million. As the number denotes, it had a devastating effect on the world population. Its breakout was from 1346 to 1353, and it marked the beginning of the Second Plague pandemic. At that time, it was even considered as God's punishment to your deeds. It wreaked havoc in Africa, Asia, and Europe. The causative agent is Yersinia pestis. It is commonly spread by fleas or by person-to-person transmission. There are many disputes on the origin of the disease. It's likely that it was spread by trading ships. The symptoms of the disease were fever, chills, vomiting, and pus from the sites of the infection. The virus, once inside your body, attacks the lymphatic system and spreads through the blood to the lungs. Isolation and quarantine were the only primary methods of controlling the disease. You may be pondering the end of such deadly havoc. Well, WHO recently pointed out that there are about 1,000 to 3,000 cases of plague every year. Number 8. Asian flu. Asian flu, caused by influenza A virus, is another worst pandemic in global history. Its outbreak in the year 1957 was caused by H2N2, while a decade later, H3N2 caused the Hong Kong flu pandemic. The death toll was recorded to be about 1 to 4 million. Reports showed that the first cases were in Guizhou in China. However, at the time, China was not a member of the World Health Organization, so the outbreak in China was not very much revealed. Later, outbreaks of the disease were reported in countries including Hong Kong and Singapore. H2N2, being a recombination of avian influenza and human influenza viruses, was a novel strain among the population, and thus people had minimal immunity to the virus. Number 7. HIV pandemic. AIDS, being associated with a lot of taboo, is something that is widely discussed in society. The first case was reported in 1981. Mortality rates for AIDS is very high, and the death toll is about 40.1 million. The region most affected by this pandemic is Africa. However, the occurrence of the disease has rapidly decreased recently, mainly due to proper awareness. No complete cure is possible for the disease. Antiretroviral therapy is now the treatment of choice. People at increased risk are those with multiple sex partners and intravenous drug abusers. HIV virus is the causative agent of the disease and was identified in 1983. NACO was introduced with the prime objective to control the disease. ELISA is the most suitable method of diagnosis of AIDS. Number 6. Swine flu. Swine flu caused by H1N1 influenza virus is considered as the third flu pandemic by WHO. Its outbreak was in June 2009, and the first case was reported in the US. Almost 11 to 21% of the total population was affected with the virus. Pneumonia associated with the disease is either caused by the virus or by a secondary bacterial infection. Number 5. Sixth cholera pandemic. Well, this one is huge. It started in India and was responsible for the death of about 800,000. Well, being a pandemic was not restricted to India alone. It spread through the Middle East, Russia, and North Africa. It was in the year 1910 to 1911. Well, being in the sixth outbreak of cholera, people prepared themselves pretty well, and measures were taken. The spread of the disease in America was therefore brought to levels quickly, but the disease and its effects were persisted in India. Number 4. Russian plague. Commonly known as the Plague of 1771, had a widespread effect in Russia, even reshaped the map of Russia. The total death varies from 50 to 100,000. It is the last outbreak of plague in central Russia. Preventative measures like quarantine points were introduced by Peter I and was expanded by Catherine II. Several political changes were seen as a result of the outbreak, including reduction in taxes. Number 3. Antonine Plague. Antonine Plague, commonly known as Plague of Galen, named after the physician Galen, was the first pandemic which affected the Roman Empire in 165 to 180 AD. The fatality rate is about 25%. The total number of cases reported is about 5 to 10 million. The first case was reported in the city of Seleucia. Number 2. Third cholera pandemic. Third cholera pandemic is the most deadliest among the 7 cholera pandemics. The first case was reported in India in the 19th century and later spread throughout the globe. Contaminated food and water is the main source of the disease. The death toll is about 1 million. Well, the next one is the one you must have been waiting for from the beginning of the video. Yes, the last one is the novel coronavirus. Number 1. COVID-19. COVID-19 is the most recent pandemic caused by SARS-CoV-2. The first case was reported in Wuhan, China. Common symptoms include fever, cough, diarrhea, and shortness of breath. The complications include pneumonia, viral sepsis, kidney failure, and are life-threatening. The transmission is mainly by droplet nuclei. The method of diagnosis are RT-PCR and antigen method. The total number of deaths reported is 6,555,901. The treatment is mainly symptomatic. Vaccination is used to provide acquired immunity against the disease. Y'all must be wrecked by hearing about the pandemics that the human race has gone through. The lives that have been lost, the families that went through hardships, all of it puts you in quite a bit of a hurdle about knowing how to deal with the pandemic. You need management methods, which all of the population should work on together to bring it to a success and keep the spread of the pandemic in control. So what are the basic methods? The most important methods of control of management of these are mitigation and containment. Containment is one of the most crucial steps in the beginning of the spread of a pandemic, which includes contact tracing and the isolation of infected individuals to prevent the spread of the disease any further to the population. Other containment methods involve public health interventions on infection control and vaccinations if available for the vaccines. When the containment methods no longer prove to be useful, then the management method by mitigation comes into play, where the measures are taken in order to slow down the spread of the disease. Well, most likely, both the methods are done in concert. Another major aspect of control is to decrease the peak of the epidemic, referred to as flattening of the curve. Well, it is believed that this provides with enough time for the development of vaccines. Well, there are also other methods which involves the basics that y'all have been doing since the COVID era has begun. Social distancing, avoiding mass gatherings, closing schools, hand hygiene, and cleaning the environment. Sounds familiar, right? Well, a pandemic is something that is to be assessed with the utmost importance. You guys know pretty well by now, right? It's with the hard work of many health workers who work day in and day out, and all the people who went according to the management strategies that has allowed the control of these pandemics over all the years and also until now. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to hit the like button on your way out. Also, let us know through the comments how your pandemic went and how you dealt with it. That's all for today. Adios, amigos.